Next goes on to actor as a scientist. And again, it's a CNN series that they had on in the 80s on television. Certain kinds of weak electromagnetic signals work exactly like drugs. And so the promise is that anything you can do with drugs, you could do with the right electromagnetic signal. And that's been rehashed and brought out recently again. Apparently there are specific sites involved, specific functions involved. It's a matter of matching them up. Just like it is with a pill or a drug to cause and effect. You could have a cause and effect relationship between a magnetic field and a biological function. Of course they can, because they're already doing it with the brain. So it's quite interesting too. It says CNN enlisted the help of noted physicist Dr. Elizabeth Roscher and electrical engineer Bill Van Bice to build and test an RF mind interference machine from data found in Soviet scientific literature. The machine itself was inexpensive and easy to construct using parts from a consumer's electronics store. That was Radio Shack at the time. It's interesting, they've changed it in Canada. You can't buy the parts anymore. It emits a weak electric signal field pulsed at extremely low frequency. As a subject to the test, I was blindfolded and my ears were blocked to prevent inadvertent clues as to what was happening. A magnetic probe was placed about 18 inches from my head. As the experiment began, 2 signal generators produced waveform patterns that were transmitted by the magnetic probe at about 1/1000th of the Earth's magnetic field strength. And then they go through the experiment describing anything that you see and feel and so on. And the control room of Van Bice varied the waveforms being generated. In another room I could see waveforms changing shape in my mind. So as they changed this on the machine, on the oscilloscope, he would actually see the same thing in his head. In his head, folks. And you think this whole idea of interfacing your brain so you can watch your beautiful games and be in the game in your head is kind of sci-fi? No, that's old stuff. So it says a parabola just went by. And that's what they call it when these images appear in your head. And he goes through the whole test here. And so this is the text from the actual show that they put on for the general population. But they can also create different kinds of visual disturbances and so on. And it was also going to be used as weaponry for against fighter pilots and so on. And yada, 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 yada. It was just all been done a long time ago. Long time ago. But if you wonder why folk are kind of dumb and stupid and they're actually the perpetual children now, really. It doesn't matter about their age. Well, maybe you're starting to catch on what's going on. It's interesting to me too that the broadband that they're really putting across Britain at very powerful rates too, even beyond Switzerland and other countries, is to be expanded further and further, so no one can escape these particular frequencies that are pervasive all over the place there. And they want to do it elsewhere as well. Quite something. Quite something. But as I say, the public will never catch on because, you see, the media will never tell them, oh, be very, very scared of this, folks. Like they do with so many other things, impending gloom and doom, and, oh, global warming is going to kill you, and all the movies that churn out. That's them telling you to be very, very afraid. But the other things that are going on, no, it's fine, it's good, it's so convenient. Blasting your temporal lobe with a cell phone, and so on. That's how the real world really does work. And many of the articles I get across here, as I say, the trivia that they throw out to the public, it reminds me of seed that you take out of a bag and throw at the chickens. That's all we get at this level is chicken feed. And it's distractions, irrelevancies, and so on, because it's always after the facts in any particular area. Unless they're promoting some new thing with Lady Gaga, how she ate a heart to get rid of her aunt's possession in her own body, of the aunt's spirit apparently, and tell you that she believes in God and all that rubbish. Doesn't tell you what God it was, of course. However, we're fed trivia at this level, absolute trivia. But here's an article here. It's quite safe to tell the public this now because nobody cares, you see. After the fact, no one cares. It's the same thing when they tell you, oh, 30 years ago we tried this on your own troops. Or we tested this stuff and sprayed an area like Saskatoon with this particular viral stuff to see what would happen to the public. Later on, folk don't care. Well, it wasn't me it happened to. I'm okay, you know. Defector admits to weapons of mass destruction lies that triggered the Iraq war. What rubbish? He didn't trigger the Iraq war. And it says, a man who was codenamed Curveball invented tales of bioweapons. So this guy's been told to take the can for it. He's been well paid, obviously. It says, Rafid Ahmed Alwan al-Janabi. He says, I had the chance to fabricate something. Defector who convinced the White House, he convinced the White House. They already had the plans made up 10 years before. That's why I hate reading this rubbish for. They're trying to say here that this guy told them that Iraq had a secret biological weapons program, even though, of course, all the weapons inspectors have been going on for years saying it had all been dismantled. And this is rubbish they're putting out for the public to believe that one guy misled the whole White House and all the staff. So I won't bother reading it, but you can read it if you do want to. But it just shows you can't believe a darn thing they put out there for you. Not a darn thing. Because the whole article is a whitewash. It's rubbish. Rubbish. They've already done interviews with people who were involved in the White House who admitted that they were told at the top, we only want to hear the stuff that helps our case. We don't want to hear stuff that's negative to the case for war. Well, what does that mean, eh? I'm surprised there's not 100 people came forward for the cash and say, oh yeah, I saw them myself. All these weapons everywhere. Mass destruction. And through this wonderful World Trade Organization that was set up with nobody's consent for the IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations, they gave us China as the main manufacturer of the world, and we financed it up to be so. We paid for their factories and everything. We paid for your own factories, leaving your own shores to go over there and get reset up. We paid for their losses for 10 years until they say they start making profits. We're awfully good to big business. China enters Europe through Poland. Amazing now, eh? So now the Poles can't get work. Says the Chinese company Govec, currently constructing the Polish motorways, might not be distorting the market as its competitors claim. Polish firms have expressed concern over the low prices that China-based construction firm Govec offered in its winning bid to build sections of a motorway. But not everyone sees the prices as being so far out of line, and some sources even say the Chinese bid may bring the market back to normality. For its part, the European Commission can find no cause for action under the current guidelines. They're hamstrung by the EU guidelines, the super Sovietized Parliament of Europe. And as I say, that it's going to give the people there no work at all. They're bringing them in from China and putting them up in big camps. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't globalism just wonderful? And what's it, each country's telling you, all your top ministers, as they say in Britain, and politicians and congressmen in the US, globalism is going to bring equality across the world. Really? Well, how far are we supposed to plummet? Well, guess what? You better hang on to your hat because you're going to lose it on the way down. And everything else, I might add to that. Australia, that's totally socialist now, has gone even further with giving teachers. See, anybody who works for the government now, even gets a salary from the government or even partially through the government, is now basically working for the government. Kind of like Canada. I can't remember how many, 1 in 4 at one point in the 80s worked for the government at the time. I think it's going way up, or gets a wage check from the government. That's way beyond that now. Teachers may be able to search the parents' cars. It's not just step by step. This change would give principals and teachers powers usually reserved for the police. That was an ABC TV News. It says school principals and teachers in Victoria may be given the power to search parents' cars if the state government changes school safety laws. The government says it's part of a crackdown on weapons in schools, but parents, civil libertarians and principals are warning against the proposed laws. The change would give principal powers usually reserved for police to the teachers. Education Minister Martin Dixon says changes to the school safety laws will ensure principals and teachers have the authority to maintain order and safety. If, for example, a parent's car was being used for an excursion and a principal had a reasonable belief there might be a hidden weapon or a dangerous item in the car, that would put the students in the car in danger, then the principal has got the right, therefore, and the backup to search that car for that weapon, he said. The idea was not received very well by talkback callers in Melbourne ABC Radio Today. And then they go through what the caller said about it, which you can imagine what they did say. But it won't matter, because you see, the total communistic, socialized equality society is on a roll. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back and this is Cutting Through the Matrix. I've talked before about how they're selling off parts of Britain and so on and different parts of Europe, and that's the whole idea of privatization for big corporations for the new feudal state and system, as we find from Carl Quigley and others, as we talked about a new feudal society where feudalism rules and the new CEOs of big corporations will be the feudal overlords, and that's what we have. Here's Greece here, where they want to sell off the state's assets. And I guess that means that's the Parthenon and everything, I guess. It's up for sale, you see. And who's telling them to do this? Well, it's the International Monetary Fund, this big, strange organization that works with the World Bank, with the big international money lenders behind it. That's who comprise it. And it says Papandreou's office said Saturday he's personally complained to International Monetary Fund Director Dominique Strauss-Kahn over the unacceptable behavior of the European Union. That's the big new Soviet, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank experts monitoring Greece's economic reforms. He also called the EU Economic Affairs Commissioner Olli Rehn, the Prime Minister's office said, and it's reportedly planning similar protests to European Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso and the ECB President Jean-Claude Trichet, who knows what it's pronounced. Anyway, it says here, they were told to start selling state assets and speed up reforms to keep its tortuous recovery on track. They'll never get out of this debt. Neither will any other country, by the way, not with compound interest. It's meant to control you all and own you all. That's what it's all about. And it says it's well known that there's a huge potential for privatization, the European Commission representative Servas Derous told a news conference. A comprehensive plan through 2015 will be finalized, aiming at proceeds of 50 billion euros between 2011 and 2015, he said. Out of that total to be used for debt reduction, 15 billion euros, which is American $20.32 billion, I think, is to come in the next 2 years, the EU officials said. The behavior of the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, and European Central Bank reps. Central banks, that's a big part of this, isn't it? The centralized banking system, the big cabal that runs the world, says it was unacceptable. Government spokesman George Petalotos said in an earlier statement. We asked them to help us and are fully meeting our obligations, but we did not ask anybody to meddle in internal matters of the country, he said. Well, now they're getting taught that they're going to get meddled with or not. The big boys want their swag, their pound of flesh, you see. Greek newspapers and opposition parties were equally scathing, but many also took a swipe at the ruling socialists for bargaining with the EU, the IMF and the ECB, the Troika supervising Greece's recovery from near bankruptcy. And sure enough, they've been socialists for years. See, in socialism, you've got to have a massive welfare state, you understand, to create the debt in the first place. That's why the bankers want it. That's why they push nothing but socialism. You've got to always keep a massive welfare state there. And then you bring in the world equality stuff. So not only are you feeding your own people that you can't find work for, because you made sure your factories and work's all gone elsewhere, you've got to feed the rest of the world, go down into this big global plantation. Back to the feudal system, It never left us in reality. I heard too that the Prime Minister of Britain, under his austerity plan, when he was announcing it there, he had his £200,000 Jaguar outside. Just to show you how to be austere. Not that anyone is really bothered about it. There's too much on the telly, isn't there? From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night to me, your God, or your gods go with you.